Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to the UNFPA and UNESCO's side event on the future of programming. I'll pass it over to Thuranga and Wenwen to kick us off and welcome you all.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, all good to see you all. So my name is Taranga and I'm the head of foresight in UNFPA. Over to you, Wen.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this side event. My name is Wenwen. I'm the program analyst on foresight at UNFPA. And to you, Christine.
Thanks so much. Yes, I'm Christine Kapzenjan, currently responsible for the Futures Literacy and Foresight program at UNESCO's Social and Human Sciences sector. So as mentioned, very, very happy to welcome you all to this webinar. Hope you have been enjoying all of the UN 2.0 events going on so far. We are going to dive right in because we don't have enough time, too much time. And of course, we want to leave some time at the end for an open exchange and discussion. I think now the chat may be closed, but you can raise your hand. Feel free to kind of try and interact if anything comes to mind. So maybe we can share the slides. Thank you so much, Wenwen. So of course, we're here to talk about takeaways from a very important interagency collaboration between UNESCO and UNFPA. And before we start sharing some of these takeaways from how we reimagined the futures of programming, I wanted to maybe do a little bit of framing around futures and foresight. I think probably if you've joined this webinar, you are already a little bit familiar with futures and foresight. Maybe next slide, please. But for those who are not, sometimes futures literacy and foresight has kind of this image pops into one's mind. It's kind of, the fortune telling or predicting kind of the future. But we know that, futures thinking and foresight is really not about prediction, but rather about exploring kind of the plurality of multiple futures, to come back and think about the present, to kind of ask the what if questions and what we might do differently. So I think that's what Thuranga will talk to you about today. Yes, sorry, next slide. Yes, thank you. You may or may not be familiar with this image. Speaking of prediction, this is kind of taken from a series of images developed by Jean-Marc Coté in 1901, where he was asked to produce kind of predictions or images of the year 2000. And so as you're looking at this image, I would love for you to think about what sticks out, what stands out to you. If you think back in 1901 and what education looks like today, what are some of the things that you might pick up when looking at this image? And we can maybe come back to this later. But I suppose one that I wanted to really highlight is, of course, related to our topic today. I mean, not only programming, but UNFPA's mandate. We see there are no girls in the classroom. So I think one large part of what we try and do when planning for the future, particularly in developing long-term strategies, is becoming aware of our biases and our assumptions. And of course, here there is one that is very much projected into the future, which is that, it's still all men in the classroom. Next slide, please. So of course, we know the future is not linear. We have plan A, plan B, and then real life that takes us kind of in many, many directions. Unexpected events might derail us from the strategies that we've laid out, not only in terms of achieving those objectives, but also in terms of making sure that the strategies that we've developed for the long term are still fit for purpose, despite the unexpected events that have occurred. So this is kind of some framing and what we try to do with the UNFPA UNESCO project. And so before passing it over to Thurenga, I will just close with this image, which is probably more of a accurate illustration of not only the future, but also the present. And the point is, again, when applying futures literacy and foresight to our long-term thinking and strategy development, it's what helps us make a choice. And that's the needle that's going forward. Of course, we can go in many different directions, but we have to make a choice and act. And futures literacy and foresight really helps us understand kind of the systems and the trends that are taking place and allows us to make kind of a more informed and inclusive decision. So with that, I'll pass it over to Thurenga. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. Thank you everyone for joining. So I'm sure you are sort of like excited to see what exactly we really meant by future of programming, what we found as part of this Futures Lab conducted jointly with UNESCO. So before going to that, I really want to, just to give a couple of words about UNFPA, because UNFPA is the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency. I'm sure some of you are familiar, maybe some of you have not heard about UNFPA. So the work we have done under this Futures Lab is very much about thinking about the future of programming related to the sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. But you can see that there's a lot of, changes happening. Even today, we see a lot of pushbacks and we are facing so many challenges in terms of really providing services related to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, especially focusing women and young people in the world. So we thought this is the right time for us to really unpack and explore that future of programming on sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. So the scope is really critical here. So we have to really take the content, internalize the content in terms of connecting it to the scope of the Futures Lab and the UNFPA. So that is, I just want to tell you that. And UNFPA also giving, such a priority for the foresight work right now. One of the most interesting element of UNFPA is to connect foresight with strategy adjustments. So we are very much interested what sort of strategic planning or the country level, global level, and regional level, the policy decisions needs to be made, especially on the strategy side, looking into the future of the SRH, sexual and reproductive rights. So that's why this is one of our key research we have done because of that interest. So I just want to give you that introduction before going. And maybe let's move to the next slide, Wen. So in this Futures Lab, which we conducted together with UNESCO, so we had these three objectives in mind, but Christine will touch that again at the end of my slides and the methodology part. But just to give you that this lab was done in the late 2023, early 2024, with three objectives in mind. So generating the strategic insight about programming, right? Because we are really, really struggling. What would be the best way to program? Because programming is, one of our main offer as a UN entity, and especially agency like UNFPA working in 150 countries in the world. We are very serious how is our interventions are really unfolding and whether intended objectives are achieved, both past, present, and the future context, right? And the second one is we also thought this lab, I think we lost the slides. We also thought this lab is really bringing us some futures literacy. And this is one of the futures labs UNFPA has done for UNFPA staff. So that was also the second objective you can see in the screen. And then we also took these findings very seriously in terms of developing the new strategy of the organization. I think all three objectives are really critical for UNFPA in terms of having this objective. Next slide. So I'm going to touch very briefly and those 5 programmatic future of programs elements we have found as part of the Futures Lab. Due to the time, I might not go that detail, but we are going to share with you the presentation, and that will give you some entry points for you to think about deep into that, right? So, I mean, as I mentioned, there are 5 components we found. Actually, we were trying to explore the future by 2100. We were trying to go as much as, I mean, how can I say, as long as possible. So then we ended up thinking about 2100. Like, I think the long-term thinking is really what we really need at this moment of time. And because the organization is really thinking about that future. So what we found, the first part is really the criticality of focusing the principles. Right. So we are providing the name called principle focused programming. As you know, even today, the norms and standards are really, really critical for agency like UNFPA. We are working on the SRHR, gender-based violence and harmful practices and also many sensitive elements. But we learned that in that future, we may have to focus more and more with the principle side. So why we are thinking that we see that there's a lot of developments of the high tech. The technology is trying to really influence SRHR. And not only that, we also think that the surveillance systems and security systems are really coming into effect. So the principles are really critical in that world. And then we also discussed during the lab the bond between humans and machines, and how this relationship is really helping to achieve the programming related to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So especially in the context of working with machines, how critical the principles are at the center of the entire programming process. And then we also anticipated a lot of genetic adjustments, genome changes, and the digital solutions. So then, I mean, of course, the principles are coming to the center. So we really want to make sure they are ethically correct and the principle based. And then we also anticipated the family structural changes. And so the traditional family structure might be challenged at that point of times. And then the babies may be created outside of the typical biological process. And so the data interpretations and a lot of principles will be required for analyzing the data and interpreting the data. So these are some of the parameters we really discussed that. So in that world, we thought there will be a more and more demand and requirements for prioritizing the principles rather than just focusing about the delivering the service. Maybe there won't be such a service delivery component at that time, at that world. So this is really the focus of this programming approach, which UNFPA is really taking very seriously even today. Next slide, please. So let me move to the the second world of programming. I could say that. So we call it jazz programming. I hope you're familiar with this jazz music. I'm not that familiar, but this is very much the core meaning of this type of programming is, I mean, someone can also say it's a blended programming. We also use the word blending. So what do we mean by blended? So here we are really thinking about a world that is very much interconnected, right? So it's very difficult to think about the more ad hoc approaches of programming for the sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. So it's very much technology-based, very much interconnected, networked world. So in that world, how can we think about isolated and very parallel programming would really serve the purpose? So that's why I think we thought that during the lab, we discussed the criticality of prioritizing the joint programming, more and more blended programming, someone can also say more integrated programming, which will really improve the effectiveness and efficiency of achieving the desired objectives. So this is really the purpose of the JUST programming. I mean, even today, as you know, the joint accountability, I mean, the discussions are going beyond individual accountability to the joint accountability, and we expect more and more joint accountability requirements are needed to really serve the purpose related to the sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights in that world. Next slide, please. So the third programming world UNFPA found during this lab is we call novelty programming, or someone can also say learning programming. And here, and actually we thought the world is like at that point of time, anyone can learn anything. So everything is based on the learning part because so much adjustments, so many changes are happening every moment of time. I mean, very interesting. And there was a discussion that what extent the past knowledge and experience is really helping at that moment of time. So the curiosity and the ready to explore and learning thinking or approach is really the way forward, and the programming style when you really look at in this type of world. So here we also discussed actually the criticality of new research, new knowledge generation. And very interesting, we were also wondering what extent data scientists and statisticians can play a role. Maybe their role going to be completely different at that part of the time. And then, so what extent the past knowledge is relevant. I mean, I already mentioned that point. And there won't be any hierarchical system. Everyone has a chance to learn everything, and it's very open society. And a lot of knowledge is really generated through the technology and using the machines. So learning, curiosity, and exploring and learning and research. So we have to give more and more priority on that in this world in terms of achieving the desired objective. Next slide, please. So next we are moving to the fourth one, which is very much linked to the novelty programming, which we call chameleonic programming. I'm sure you are familiar with the chameleon, the animal who is very much willing to very much. It's a good example of really adaptation. So you can see that the purpose of this, or the real meaning of this programming, is like the criticality of adaptation. I mean, even today, the world is changing rapidly, and if you are really not adapting, your programs are not adapting, we have become irrelevant, right? And so we can see more and more in the future, UNFPA has to really think about new adaptation models in terms of programming. And so this is really the summary of this chameleonic programming we are really talking about. So the most important is the mindset here. So we should have a really adaptive mindset and the flexibility, and most interesting about what sort of leadership we should really have to demonstrate to make sure that that everyone is willing to adapt. So this is all about chameleonic programming. Next slide, please. So let me move to the last part we found during the Futures Lab, which is super interesting. We call empathy and trust programming. So we believe there will be more and more distrust and social disconnection due to the technological advancements in the context of sexual and reproductive health at that time. So the trust and empathy is really at the center of programming. And so there will be a new narrative for the human rights, because maybe I remember during the lab we discussed about the criticality of going the rights narrative beyond living beings, even for the machines and non-living components, and the trust between humans and machines. And so therefore this is super interesting, and we are still trying to see in terms of the programming today, what sort of adjustment we should really make today to make sure that our programs are very much building the focus in the empathy and trust. And we also discussed about during the lab, the families and individuals are getting more and more lonely and isolated, and there will be a lot of mental health needs. And so that isolation also has an impact of the overall empathy and trust. And then family structure may be drastically changed at that time. And that's also very much linked to the isolation and having a mental health challenges. And so, yeah, in this situation, I think more and more thinking is needed to build the programming is needed to interventions are needed to build the trust and really build the focus the empathy and fairness among citizens and between humans, machines, and living beings. Next slide, Wenwen. I think that's it. I hope that just to summarize that those 5 components are the ones we found during the lab. And I want to pass the floor back to Christine just to give some insight about the methodology and how we really arrived this thinking.
Thank you so much, Thanga. And I mean, I think that these outcomes that you shared are really showcasing how this initiative took all of the kind of systems change and the trends that we're seeing today and their possible evolutions to eventually come back and think about, what does this mean for UNFPA? What does this mean for our strategic planning today? So that's really, and from what I recall, when we did this, it was just really incredibly rich discussions. And so I'm very happy to share with you all the kind of methodology that we took, which is kind of this futures literacy and foresight. At UNESCO, we talk about this as a capability-based approach, meaning that we're really focused on building this skill. And I think, again, Tharanga had mentioned in every single outcome that was highlighted, he talked about mindset. And the mindset is very much related to this competency and this skill, especially when it comes to this critical need, for adaptability and flexibility and agility and such. So what is futures literacy and foresight all about? Let me ask you to just go to the next slide, please. Of course, a systematic approach to the future, also a systemic approach. So taking into consideration, the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal, and more cultural values into consideration. What are the changes and how does that impact when we're thinking about strategy? How does that impact our strategy? So it's really a systems outside look in to the specific topic that we're thinking about. Beyond, developing scenarios and thinking about the future, we're also thinking about, using this capability to shift our time horizon. We're very often too ingrained in either the present or even the past, or, short time horizons like, 6 months or quarters, etc. Of course, talking about this idea of diverse futures. So we all may look at the future differently, and this capability allows us to think about the plurality as discussed, opening and becoming more familiar and comfortable with uncertainty, making futures accessible, of course, empowering people, because when we think about the future, it can be very overwhelming and we can maybe say, I'm putting my hands up and there's nothing I can do about it. So talking and planning for the future creates some agency. And when we're developing strategic plans, this is of course very important. And as I've mentioned already throughout this webinar, also it's about coming back to the present. So using the future to think about how we might act differently today. Next slide, please. Very, very quickly, the Futures Literacy Framework kind of bases its framework on 2 kind of paradigms of anticipation. One is around anticipation for the future, which is really this importance of planning and preparation. And often when we do strategic planning, it's kind of ingrained in this paradigm. We think long term, and we make these assumptions that there will be continuity. We try to predict. We think about cause and effect relationship. And this other paradigm of anticipation, which is anticipation for emergence, where in this workshop in particular and in the methodology, we try to get the participants to engage with uncertainty And so the more you engage with something, just like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And so the more comfortable you get with uncertainty, the less kind of quote unquote afraid or shy, or the less you'll kind of move away from it, and the more you might embrace it. So it's really about curiosity and experimentation. Next slide, please. So just again, when we run any workshop, and in particular in this case, we take kind of 4 phases, or a mix of those. So first and foremost, phase 1 is about kind of probable and preferable futures. So what is likely and what do we want to happen? And there's often a very big difference, or not, between those futures. We do a reframed future, meaning this is kind of the phase where we get participants to really kind of engage with the uncertainty, as I said, where we developed specifically in this case a very unlikely, undesirable future for the participants to engage in and make sense of. And so just as an example, COVID is a very good example of a reframe that we've actually all lived through, where, you know, something happened, there was a disruption. We had to continue learning, but we didn't have schools. We had to continue working, but we couldn't go into the office. So it's kind of these constraints that uncertainty brings to us, and we have to still make sense of it. So that's where you're really kind of building the skill. And then we come back to the present, ask new questions, these what if questions, and then think about planning forward. So what does this actually mean for our strategy, and how can we make sure that it's fit for purpose now that we've explored these different futures? And just a really quick note on kind of principles, because each workshop will be really tailored to the objectives of the workshop itself, and Thurenga mentioned them earlier, which were, you know, about generating strategic insights. They were about building this capacity in futures literacy and foresight, and of course, informing the strategy. So we kind of tailored the workshop to address those objectives. But so they will all kind of look a little bit different, but they will always be anchored in this idea of collective intelligence. And so with UNFPA, we had representation from the globe. We had really headquarters, field offices, regional offices. We had a very diverse group, which allowed for a really kind of engaging debate and discussion. Of course, we talk about action and learning. So you're learning by doing. And we actually co-designed. So this was very important in the approach, is that even though there is a kind of framework that UNESCO follows, we worked incredibly closely with the UNFPA team to make sure that every intervention, every aspect of design of the workshop was relevant to UNFPA and to the participants of the workshop itself. Next slide, please. I won't go too much into this, other than to say that for those of you familiar with Futures of Foresight, there are many, many, many tools that are at our disposal. And it all definitely comes down to selecting the right tools to kind of fit into a workshop that, again, makes sense and addresses the objective. So we took a really hybrid approach with the UNFPA design, and I'll mention some of the specific tools that we used in just a quick moment. Please, next slide, Wenwen. So yes, precisely. What did we specifically do for this workshop? So we had 3 days, and as we mentioned, those kind of 3 objectives we tried to address them all in those 3 days. And for this reason, we took a very unique kind of approach where we integrated not only kind of the implementation of the lab, which is this action learning, but also infused kind of pedagogy and the academic grounding of the field of future studies throughout the 3-day workshop in order to also build the future's capacity, in complement to developing some new insights and informing the strategy. So on the first day, we talked about probable and preferable, so those futures that we want. We did this reframe on the second day, and then the third, we came back to eventually arrive at those very, very rich outcomes that Rega mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So the tools that we use specifically for day one was the causal layer analysis. Why did we do this? This is really about narrative building, and we talked about kind of systems thinking. This allows us to think about the different layers that come with a future, rather than attributing one blanket statement to a future image. The causal layer analysis developed by Sohail and Ayatollah allows the participants to really develop a real narrative with specific details around the story. We used it for the probable and the reframe. For the preferable futures, we took an approach to develop personas. And if you think back to that image that we were sharing earlier about the kind of projected futures of learning from the year 1900 to 2000, we saw that there was kind of perhaps a lack of consideration of different voices. And the future personas were very much related to thinking about, first and foremost, which are the voices that we don't often hear from. So I remember we had a young adolescent girl from Papua New Guinea, for example, that was represented in the future personas. We also had personas that were characters unknown to us, like the president of ineptitude, and these kind of personas were almost a reflection of the trends and the evolutions that we were discussing, and what are the implications of first and foremost these personas. What do their lives look like? What are their values and priorities? So it allows us to really think outside of our own prism of thought and take on and challenge ourselves really to take the perspective of someone that we don't really know. And then back to the present, since here we're talking really about informing strategy, we use the 3 Horizons framework, which again, many of you may be familiar with, but the 3 Horizons framework really lets us think about the present. What are the elements of the present that we're seeing change? What are the elements of the present that we want to keep in the future? Of course, for the future, we're also thinking about, what are some of the signals of change and how will they evolve into a possible future? And most importantly, this middle, I'm sorry if the image is small, but the middle column shows the transition. So what needs to be done in order to kind of achieve this vision, achieve something or develop something that's really fit for purpose for the future. Next slide, please. Sorry, I will conclude with the next 2 slides to just say that you have many, many resources at your disposal. We published at UNESCO a playbook. So if you want to design your own workshop, this playbook is available to you online, open access. And also on the next slide, if you're not part of the UN Strategic Foresight Community of Practice, do join. You have an entire knowledge hub at your disposal where you can have access to case studies, to foresight resources, and of course, a community where you can exchange ideas and knowledge with. So I will stop there, and before we open up the floor for Q&A, we wanted to get some of your thoughts very, very quickly through a Mentimeter. So if you have your phones available to you, you can just scan this QR code to join the Mentimeter. Otherwise, you can join through your computer at menti.com. It will be really, really quick. And definitely in the meantime, as we go through these, please feel free to think about some questions because we do want to have a discussion. Okay, I will share my screen. Can you see my screen? Right. So if you'd like to join, I think I already see 11 people on there. So thinking back to Tharanga's presentation, what stood out to you when it comes to using foresight for strategy or any of the principles that Tharanga shared? Is there anything that stood out to you specifically from this case study in particular? Yes, it's a open-ended question, so feel free to type in. So some program approaches, the personas, and it was theoretical. Okay, maybe we can talk more about that in the Q&A. And Tharanga and Wenwen, please do feel free to jump in. We create the futures. So that's a question about agency. For me, that's what I read, which is really meaningful, I would say. Institutional support. So is that it's important to have institutional support, possibly, or that there was institutional support? AI and UNFPA. Tharanga, what are your any thoughts on that one? AI always makes it into every futures discussion, I must say. Okay, so feel free to keep adding in there. Futures thinking to inform the present. Appreciated about novelty and learning. Sharing tools for future planning was also a great touch. The future is for everyone, absolutely. This is nice to read because it is not only in the hands of a few. There's a nice quote that, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I think with the all of the efforts that are coming from UN agencies or in terms of advancing foresight is kind of dismantling this quote. Great. Thank you so much for your comments here. Next question. What other approaches, we want to pick your brains. What other approaches may be relevant when using foresight for strategy? If you have any, perhaps you have some experience or this sparked an idea for you, we're definitely here to listen to you as well. And backcasting, definitely. Population projection. So yeah, the leverage of data, quantitative, let's say quantitative foresight, because of course, I think what we didn't talk about this balance between quantitative and qualitative scenarios, let's say. Behavioral science, absolutely. And I think there are many, many amazing events that are happening throughout the week that are showcasing the benefits and approaches there. Super. I'm going to quickly go through the next so that we can maybe take at least one or two questions. Any takeaways for foresight and strategy in your own context? Is there something that stood out in general that maybe you might want to try in your context to inform your strategy or to maybe even think about your strategy differently? So thinking about budget cuts and the reality of constrained environments, perhaps. If you want to elaborate on that, feel free. But yes, it's kind of rethinking, what can we do with less, perhaps. Anything else? Leveraging AI for adaptive decision making. Certainly critical to remain fit for the future. And that means we have to keep practicing. Again, also, Thuranga mentioned the fact that they've gone back and they're thinking about things again, and futures and foresight, particularly from a strategic perspective. It's really important to have this iterative cycle and allow yourself to even go back to your own solutions and ask the questions again to make sure that we remain fit for purpose. Super. Before we open up the floor to questions or comments, leave us with a one-worded final thought at the end of your day or in the morning. When you think back to this webinar, what will come to mind? Creativity. I love it. Perhaps a few more. Fantastic. These are really wonderful. Future creativity learning, futures with an S, co-creation. Love it. Thanks a lot. I mean, we'll leave that one open, and when I pass it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have 5 minutes left, and so we'll open the floor for any questions. I think you can raise your hands and say any questions. I think we have a question from Victoria, and I don't know if he's still here. That he's asking for support to collecting all the initiatives.
Is that regarding all the initiatives for UN 2.0 week? If so, maybe we'll take that back to the organizers of the event. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I saw one question. Lola, please.
Oh, thank you, Wenwen and Tharanga. Thanks for that presentation. But then what comes to my mind is, I know it's difficult to really explain foresight, but how is UNFPA looking at a long-range foresight without losing focus on the urgent and the real-time needs now?
So Christine and Tharanga, do you want to pick up that one? Or we will just collect more questions and we can. And Vasana, please. Okay, so I have to allow you to talk.
Now we'll get more questions.
Yeah.
An excellent presentation as usual. My question is that I think foresight is key. Using AI, will be very important as well. Can you give us some guidance that we have quite a few subjects under care, right? How can we take foresight in without delaying until we read the manual, until we wait until we have good understanding? But give us some tips. How can we pick up foresight and integrate that into our daily work without delay? Thank you.
Yeah. So Christine or Tharanga, do you want to take these two questions?
Christine.
Oh, sorry, there's one other one, Aline.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Thank you. So first, excellent work, very, very inspiring. So my question is about how, in your experience, did you manage to inspire senior managers to use foresight approaches? Because in general, we can see a tendency that might be a little bit risk averse UN agencies. So how you navigate that? Thank you.
All right, so let's take these 3 questions.
So maybe I'll try first. Answer, then I'll pass the floor to Christine, and when you can also come anytime. So maybe the question on the real-time needs and the foresight from Omolola. I think though we are really exploring the long-term future, the immediate future also important. The agency like UNFPA, especially with the current situation, right? We need to make sure that context is changing rapidly. So we are also prepared for the immediate future. The things like strategic 4-year strategic planning cycles, right? They are maybe for our desired future, capturing in a very short-term future, but we are equally giving attention to that to really make sure we are tackling the current and the immediate the context and the dynamics on SRHR. So therefore, I think though while we are looking at the long-term future and trying to backcast and trying to gradually integrate that components into the strategic planning, the immediate strategic planning or the current strategic planning also, I think the present situation also is equally important. That's my experience. And it's really, really critical because people are dying. Mothers are dying giving birth today. We cannot wait. So we need to react to it immediately. So I think that's the answer for it. I think we really need to have as a UN entity working for 150 countries in the world, we need to have a balanced approach here. So we are really thinking about the future of the 10-year-old girl, her future, and when she becomes our age, and that is also our accountability as an entity while addressing the needs of the today. I think you raise an excellent point, Omolola. And then the other one is some tips for integration foresight. I think this is Vasana, I think, sorry, for the UNFPA. So we are having some interim guidance until we are really, we really want to make sure we have enough learning before releasing the UNFPA corporate frameworks. We give a lot of time to learn and piloting before scaling up. So that's why I think there's a little bit slow approach here. So, but we will, at the interim purpose, there are a lot of interim guidelines. So maybe we will, I know you're from UNFPA, we will share with you directly those points on that. So, and in terms of the senior management, it's super interesting in the current context, especially the low resource environment, right? UN entities are all facing some challenges, and there is a high demand for efficiency and effectiveness in the current context. How to prioritize foresight going to be another webinar. But I think our approach is, since UNFPA is very much interested about the strategy and foresight combination, right? So we do not see much challenges right now. Maybe I'm just believing it's because of the strategy component here, because no one can say strategy is not important. We all investing in strategy, even though you have a $1, you need to invest in strategically how to spend that $1. There's no question that. So maybe strong linkage to the strategy, giving priority on strategy, going to be excellent entry point for senior managers. You might not really open the whole foresight discussion without strategy discussion. So just going these two together, it's going to be I think our learning right now is the best approach to really harness this. I do not believe just having a foresight discussion in the current context would be going to be very, very, very challenging, right? So it has to be contextualized to whatever you do. And in our case, it's about strategy. So I'll stop there and I'll pass the floor to Christine. I don't know whether you have anything to add.
Thanks. I think all your last point about this linking foresight to a core function of the business is really, I think, super, super impactful. And if you can find maybe some low stakes moments to get people in your organization from, any level to senior managers to actually engage in a futures exercise, this could also be quite meaningful because they will see and experience, we talked about action learning, the impact that it could have on the way they think about strategic planning or you know, whatever topic you choose to do. So I'll just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Yeah, and another thing that maybe I can add on the AI and the foresight, there's a lot of discussion on how to leverage AI and how to integrate AI into foresight. There's a lot of tools out there, and I think there's a lot of trial programs going there, and including like dedicated applications for foresight and or large language models. There's too many different large language models. And at UNFPA, we are trying to test all these different tools and trying to develop a systematic way to integrate AI into foresight and to develop a system that dedicated to UNFPA, which is also very ethical, because the question on AI and foresight, it's a very new thing. Everyone is trying to rush in it because we don't want to miss the opportunity. But where is the principles? Who are using it? What the data bias that the large language models always have and other AI tools that is trying to address. So our approach is trying to develop by ourselves with our partners, trying to really to understand what the large language models mean to us and how to use it and how to make sure that the data privacy, how to make sure that it's ethical use. So we are still piloting with some countries, and once it's ready, I think it won't be too long, then we will publish it very soon. And we have another question, I think, Christine, that you can answer. Is that the organization, the workshop is organized by the UNESCO for the UNFPA, or it was intended to support a government looking to improve its policy and plan?
So this specific initiative we presented today was a interagency collaboration between UNFPA and UNESCO. But at UNESCO, we are also working with other member states, other stakeholders, let's say, to either build up this future's capacity or think about how we can develop more future-informed policy. Happy to connect beyond. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think it's the time. Taranga, do you want to do the close mark?
No, I think go ahead. Yes.
Thank you so much for everyone to join us today, and there will be more and more coming from UNESCO and UNFPA. If you didn't join the UNESCO Community of Foresight, please join, and also be alarmed that we will have more tools, more guidance, and more principles coming up. Oh, there's one last question, Wasana.
Not really. I can say thank you. That's all. I didn't
All
plan
right.
to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the UN 2.0 as well. And see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.